Before we get into this morning's live, I want to go over a few areas of concern here, or, well, not even concern, but just some things that we see developing today as XRP, crypto, and the bunch are trying to avoid, for all intents and purposes here, a 14th straight red weekend, or at least on a Sunday. And it looks like, at least right now, as the US wakes up, we're switching that narrative just a little bit here, which is great to see because we've had, like I said, the last 2.5 plus, well, over 3 months now. This would be the 3.5 month mark where we would have dumped every single weekend. And we had one weekend where we thought we changed the narrative. But what ended up happening is on Monday morning, the entire gains got reversed. And by the time we even opened up on Monday, it was a brutal end of the weekend. Trapped a lot of people with the false narrative, and then we haven't recovered quite from there yet. Jorge, welcome in, along with Crazy Pole. Thank you both for being in Tom's Army for 3+ months with the XP Meteor. Really appreciate that. I've got until about 10:45 this morning to do this live, and then I'm going to church. So it won't be quite an hour. I had a little bit of problem getting this started on YouTube. It would not start my live. I had to do it about 5 separate times. So it did take a minute for me to log on. Hopefully everything looks good on the screen, but it was quite a nightmare to get this out here. YouTube's getting worse and worse by the day. I'm not the only influencer who says that. On YouTube, it's getting pretty, I don't want to say the product's becoming shit, but it's becoming very porous. But I'll do my best. As long as it lets me keep doing it, I'll do it. It's just, it's becoming quite annoying when you got to take 25 minutes to try to put the live out. Jennifer, welcome in this morning, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for over 3 months with the XRP Meteor. The Fine Group, good morning, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for your second month with the XRP Meteor. Daniel, good morning. Puentes, welcome in, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for over 1 year with the I Told You So badge. Jason Whipple, good morning. Sleepless night watching everything move sideways. It was great not to be so red. Great not so red hairy screen. Yeah, that's true. Good morning, John Hall. Shane, good morning. Kirsten, Adam, welcome in, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for 3+ months with the XRP Meteor. So let's get into this since I don't have a ton of time. Well, we got 45 minutes we'll spend together, but I'm going to church today regardless. So, Oliver, welcome in, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for 3+ months with the XRP Meteor. Good morning, Marcus. Good morning, Martin. Morning, IQ. Welcome in, William. Good to see you in here, my friend. Always good to see you in here. So XRP right now at $2.41.7. We'll get into the intro, but right now we've held that layer where, hey, we have a little bit of room here, and we talked about it all weekend that we're not going to get overtly bearish until it forces us, because we have this opportunity here till we could actually pull out to $2.85. And that was assuming that this inverse head and shoulders, because it is filled out so perfectly, and it's what has kept us with, our head straight this weekend. Even though we've been talking about a 14th weekend in a row where we could dump, it didn't start out so pretty. Hopefully today, as we can see the down, inverse left shoulder, down to a head, mimicking this pattern right here and filling it in here and here now to make this inverse right shoulder, pops out. Back test doesn't quite come through the 228. We gave it all the room that we possibly could here. And in fact, we could have made it higher, as we said, to mimic it more like this. But we were giving it maximum possibility of where we thought it could come at worst case scenario. And that's how we layered it in. It has not given that back yet, which is a good sign. We've back tested the breakout point. Now it looks like we're putting in a little bit of a W reversal. Now, the one thing I'll say is you really want this right side to pull farther than the left side to show a sign of strength. That did not happen. So this is not a bullish Gartley in the sense of it could be a nice W reversal, but it's not a Gartley. So that's the first line of uh-oh. That's kind of weird that it did that. We came down to 235.48. On the second side, we came down to 235.976. You typically want to see that right side come farther down than the left. Let the bears try to act like they're in control, and then you see the bulls, come in real strong and pull it back up. In this scenario, we didn't come back far enough for that to be considered a bullish Gartley. So, I mean, it's a W reversal, but a lot of times these become thought about, because it's not a, like this is a Gartley reversal. W comes down on the left side, pulls farther on the right, gets a volatile swing up. W comes down, pulls up before it pulls through. So in a technical sense, we're looking for a more bullish W setup than that. Although this isn't a invalidated W reversal, it's just it's going to need a little bit more volume to help steam it up. We need some steam here. So this could be an early signal sign that we didn't have a lot of buying pressure, or that it reversed up too quick. So we just look at the little hints within, but at the same time, we had a bullish Gartley, and this W was a back test. So I don't put as much stock in the second W. I put more stock into where it did it here, how it did it here. It had a nice reversal Gartley, reversal Gartley. This one's not the Gartley reversal. It's still a W reversal. It just didn't pull out in the second way. So I'm curious on why that happened. And what the reasoning is, but it's still a W reversal. You could still say you got an inverse left shoulder, inverse head, inverse right shoulder. So then you could start saying, well, maybe instead of a Gartley, this is just an inverse head and shoulders in the short term. So that's why I like to dissect it a little bit deeper. But with that being said, good morning. 10:03 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on this Sunday, March 23rd, 2025. I'm XRP Future Millionaire, and I reside in the great state of Michigan. So I welcome everybody in. Don't forget to give thanks to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ on this beautiful Sunday morning. I'm going to find my way to church at 10:45. I'm going to shut this off. I got to start walking up there right around that time. So I'm going to shut this off at 10:45. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I'm going to go up there and spend some time with the Lord, so to say. It's been a few weeks since I've been able to get there because we were staying in a hotel a couple weeks ago, and then just the nuances of doing what we're doing made it a little difficult. And then having a special needs son, sometimes he's up late. So today I got up and I said, I'm doing this live, and then I'm going to go represent at the church. Not because I want to go to the particular church, but because I like to feel the spirit of everybody and feel where we sit on this given week. Can usually feel a concerted energy. So let's stay focused. Let's stay straight and narrow. And as long as we stay helpful, kind, giving, not taking, positive, not negative, we're winners, not victims here is the best way of putting it. You keep your mindset straight, and we'll be able to focus on these charts just the way they're supposed to be. Tanya, welcome in, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for over 2 years with the XRP 589 Moon Badge. I love it. Love it. Thank you so much, love, for being in here. It makes my day. Byron, welcome in. I'm glad to see you in here, my friend. Timothy Perez, welcome in, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for 2+ months with the XRP Meteor. Randad, welcome in, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for over 3 years with the XRP Diamond Hands badge, along with Trading with J-Ride as well, both in Tom's Army for over 3 years with the Diamond Hands badge. Yes, Tanya, the volume is extremely low right now. Extremely low. And that W reversal we had on XRP, it doesn't give me like a ringing endorsement, but we are back on top of the 20-day. We're back on top of the 200. We're back on top of the golden cross after the back test. I really wish this would have pulled down just a little bit farther. That's just my own personal bias. It always gives me a better feeling when that right side overtakes the left side and then the bulls still come through and pull it out. But, that's not the case right now. So now in the USA, I always say give some grace on Sunday. Normally during the week, we say 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The U.S. starts trading, and then we'll see some of that upward volatility start to rise to the depths below, if it's meant to. Well, right now you give a little bit of grace, and we're about, an hour or so ahead of that, but it's Sunday, or behind that, but it's Sunday. So sometimes on Sunday, you get the people in the USA waking up a little bit later. On the Pacific Standard Time, they're waking up at 7. It's 10 o'clock on the East Coast, right, or Eastern Standard Time Zone. So we try to see how this is going to be developed. I waited just a tiny bit longer. I was trying to make this come on at about 9:40, but because YouTube had a little bit of issues, it would not let me go live. It made me reset it so many times. I almost bashed my head through my own tablet, but I stayed calm. It's just, it's annoying. It's amazing that 4 years ago, tomorrow, when I started on YouTube, it was smoother than it is in 2025. We had a better product in 2021 on YouTube than I do in 2025 to present my stuff. And that's not supposed to be that way. But they tried to target how TikTok does their stupid vertical stuff and stupid things like that. Left-handed anger time. That's right. That is right. Let's see. Joseph, welcome in. John Patak, good morning, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for over 2 years with the XRP 589 Moon Badge. Incredible show of support. So we know what we're looking at for XRP. We know the areas that we can push out of. And we know that 228, 229 area is something. I talked about this scenario once where you break up a little bit, and then once you get up to that 248, there's just not enough steam or somewhere around there, and you round down and fill out something like that, and maybe even further. But that's a scenario, if we can't break past that, that would be like a head and shoulders scenario. That's what we're trying to avoid on this weekend. That's the only goal I have this weekend, or even if it drags us into Monday morning. My only goal is to avoid making this head and shoulders little short-term setup, because we're trying not to mimic the bigger head and shoulders that is clearly there unless invalidated. So now we're trying to make sure we don't make these in shorter time frames, because once you start making these head and shoulders in shorter time frames, then you can start making the case that we are in fact taking the stairs down. And I don't want to make that case yet until we have to. So I'm watching these from all angles. That's why I think the weekends are very important to still watch the analysis, even though the ETFs are closed. A lot of people take a break for their brains on the weekend. I just think that leaves you behind on Monday. There is no rest for the brain if you are an active trader, if you're an investor, if you're trying to see a certain setup, you can't take breaks. And I know it sucks. We're not robots. But to me, if this is work for everybody, you're probably in the wrong field. It shouldn't feel like work. It should be stressful, but it shouldn't be work. This is taking money that you make from a job, that you make from your living, that you've invested over the years, and you take, and you got to find a better avenue for it. So it shouldn't feel like work. If it feels like work, you're probably not cut out for trading, because why should it feel like, what should feel like work is not trying to put in the effort. Because why would you want to invest in something or have your money working somewhere that you know damn well how hard it was to make that money? You've got to put every single bit of fortitude you have into it so you don't lose that money. Like that's a big lesson. Like if you don't want to lose it all, you've got to be here all the time. It's that one moment you miss. It's that one piece of info you skip over. It's that one piece of detailed knowledge that you skip past, that you look back on in the future and you're like, uh-oh. Just like for me right now, I'm looking at the fact that, yes, we filled this out over here, and we filled this out over here, and then we've got a wider look. So if this is going to actually pan out, you can only come so far. And we've already come as far down as we can to fill this out the proper way. Now, is there an argument to be made if we drag out a little bit? Maybe if we come out to 218, 219, it would be fine. Absolutely, because then you'd have more like a triple bottom. But we want to see this extend out now. I want to see this start extending out. We can already see, or at least I can see, where you could take this aside from the wick and start to say, okay, we're trying to force some kind of an uptrend here. If you take, just the candle body, connect it to the uptrend there, it looks like this is what we're trying to form some kind of nice uptrend here. So now if we're going to hold this, you got to start using this as your uptrend support. And then you're going to have to you're going to have a volatile breakout past 265 and eventually overtake that. I don't even want to say 275 because it's higher. So let's just try to retake this area at 268. But that's the little uptrend we're trying to hold. If that doesn't hold, it's going to be a problem going into next week. But right now, it's not looking so bad. We've had a few Sundays where we started off like this. We've got to see how we end up going through the early afternoon. It's just... it's not that I don't trust them all. I don't trust the market. It's not even the market in particular I don't trust. It's the players involved. It's the players involved. So I like to see it from a non-biased perspective every day. That's why I give you the micro when I start. Then we go through the macro of the deeper potential within this if we do a wave 5. And then we start looking at news and notes so that we can see like, okay, is our micro and our macro on point, or is something missing? And I think we've been pretty well on point here. I really do. It's just a very difficult time. It's a very difficult time in cryptocurrency because risk assets right now are getting blasted. So, it's just This is just something we have to deal with, and it's not the end of the world. We've been through, this is our third cycle right now. We went through the bear market of 21 into the bull when I started in March of 21. Then we went to the bear market of 22 and 3, back to the bull market of late 24. And now we're into this like mini bear market or just bull market consolidation. And now we're trying to make that either advancement or the confirmation that we're not strong enough yet and we still need to find more layers of support. We're kind of in that the in-between moment. These are some of my favorite times to be doing analysis and stuff because I don't get too far ahead, but I also don't stay too far behind. So like I like to stay in the moment. And not a lot of people do, but it's something that I believe breeds reward, or it breeds a response from us to stay active and engaged, but it also reaps rewards for all of us by understanding a situational moment. Kryptonian, welcome in, and thanks for being in Tom's Army for over 6 months with the XRP Predictor. I greatly appreciate that, my friend. It's also why I encourage unity, love over hate. You know, the positivity over negativity, the mindset of we're not going to be so emotional just because of a number today, but we're going to look at the whole grandstanding to where we can make a logical conclusion of what's to come. I think that's the hardest thing when you look at a screen of numbers like today. Right now, because we never gave back those bearish sections, we're able to maybe try to make a move here on Sunday, and it would be phenomenal to finally get a close. And remember, on Sunday, we're not in Sunday yet. That's the crazy thing. Like, I understand we're green. I understand some things are 1, 2, 3% up. You know, some things maybe a little bit more, but they've come back a little bit down here this morning. But remember that Sunday candle doesn't open until 8 p.m. We've had many times where this Saturday candle going into Sunday at 8 p.m. is green, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, Sunday at 8 p.m., you know, we start red. You know, so this candle doesn't mean anything to me. This isn't the candle on this daily that means something. Yes, it can lead credence to maybe reversing to start the week, but this candle right now has no bearing on me. It does in a sense of the fact the weekly candle's closing and the fact that this could be a reversal. And this is important, but my follow-through candle is the next daily candle because we do have a very tough bearish cross here that we've got to invalidate, which we're trying, but you won't know anything until the next daily. The weekly candle looks horrendous, in my opinion. And where it's at right now, it looks like a bearish doji. Like, that looks like a gravestone to me. Unless we can get hot here and get above this, it does look like it could be a possibility of a gravestone. It looked like it was trying to reverse, but it didn't pull down far enough here when it had to pull down. And now it's showing some bottom end pressure. Like, we did come way up, but it is showing a little bit of bearish pressure here. And it makes it an interesting candle. I would love to say that that's going to be the reversal. But with the way it's set up, we need a strong daily candle tomorrow at the flip at 8, you know, until 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. on Monday. We need a strong daily to continue this. So I'm very much in tune here to see what's about to happen. You know, so I like to be optimistic, but also be pessimistic at the same time, because then there's nothing left unturned. Do I think there's a big opportunity for it to go up? You better freaking believe it. But do I need to see some proof here? Because we've been stout, you know, we've been, certain levels have been very, very, very stout and very forceful, and we can't seem to penetrate through. So I want to see the evidence too that it's going up, but I can see it on the charts where there's a potential here. So I've had that positive tone, but still that undertone of bearishness because we understand what's set up, but we also see the reality that there could be something aligning here. But that weekly still gives me cause for concern a little bit. So now we just need to have a strong finish to the week. That is it. The daily time frame right now on Bitcoin, we're just retesting the resistance on it to try to confirm once again this death cross coming through now. So not only did the 20 come through, the 50 on a bearish come down, it came through the 100 on a downward pull, and now it came through the 200 officially in the daily on a downward tug. And now we've hit the resistance on the 20-day. If you're going to have a bearish drop, this is exactly where you have to hit and get rejected within here all the way up to 86,574. And this could be a confirmation. This would be a confirmation for Bitcoin of a bearish rejection, even though it looks like we're on the outside of that falling channel, which we are. You have to invalidate this death cross. Otherwise, it's going to turn more than just a minor short-term consolidation to support. Now it's going to flip this into a resistance area. And once that happens, 74K is unavoidable if this happens. You know, if it does the downward tug. In fact, if that's the case, I would be surprised if 74 likely. I mean, 74 could hold. But if 74 broke, then you're talking about 63,900. Who wants to go back to 63,900? That would officially mean that we've topped. More than likely. However, with Bitcoin, you can't necessarily say that this pattern's over unless you come through that 63. What is it? 63. Yeah, it's going to be around 60 in this time frame. You'd have to come down below like 63,600 to officially say this pattern's over and we put in a top. And then now we're working on a right shoulder. See, that's the problem here. I don't really want to come way back there, but I also know we've never come back there. So that cup and handle has never been properly back tested. So, you know, and I see someone talking about $2.28. That's absolutely on point because that's the back test area. Even if we take away the grace, and like I'm trying to find the grace area, but yeah, that's I think I had it like this just because then you come out of that body. But yeah, 228. I think that's a fair spot as well. That's the spot I've been targeting. And that could bounce from there to 285. But there's so much stuff here that we need to have a bona fide breakout. We have a nice little setup here in the micro. In the micro narrative, we have an inverse head and shoulders. We've already tested both sides of it. We just need we need a Sunday pump. Absolutely, hombre. That's the best way I can see it. Tanya, I agree. 228 could happen. But again, we don't want to keep retesting these areas. If we're going to keep putting in these reversal patterns and they keep failing, it's a problem. And then when we get to 228, it's likely not going to hold after a while. That's the other part of this. We've already tested that area once. You don't want to keep retesting that same structure breach after you've already used it as support a couple times. Otherwise, then eventually you just come powering through it. It's like support hit, little bit of momentum brings it back up. They sell, support hit, little bit of momentum brings it back up. Next time the support hit, there's nobody there and it falls through, and then it ends up a resistance tug because now people are selling it through. You know, and that's what I'm trying to avoid with some of these charts. I'm trying to avoid that narrative and trying to see a way through it. Bitcoin, the way through it is to come up and pop out. It's that simple. We need to pop through here. You know, all this needs to pop. All of it. It needs to. Otherwise, we're getting caught up in these sectional tugs. I don't like these sectional areas. Especially when it's on a bearish side. We're starting to break out. I don't want to come back to that bearish side. Like right now, it's on the bullish side. That's what makes this so nice. But if it breaks down, then it's back on that bearish side. And like this off the front, this was the bounce. When it broke out, this was the bounce. If it played true, you get up to 90,264. And I know I put an update out a couple days ago where I talked about that level and how we could get there. And right now, this is the way to get there. Like on this Sunday right now, we're showing a little fortitude here. We're showing a little testicular fortitude in some senses. But in other senses, it's still that undeniable brick wall that we just can't get past yet. And that's where we're at with XRP. That's where we're at Bitcoin. That's where we're at Ethereum. We're at all of these spots that make it look good in the morning, but yet it's also the rejection point for a further spot down if we can't get above. So it's like if everybody's asking me about the narrative, we don't know the narrative because the narrative says we are still on the bottom side of Shitsville. And being below the 200-day in the weekly with an engulfing candle, although it never made a new low in this weekly, which is interesting. So maybe we're going to start doing something weekly bearish cross in Ethereum. So, I mean, there's a lot of evidence here that we've got some freaking work to do. Otherwise, we're going to keep talking about the same exact fundamental flaw. And like for me, I'm not going to mistake the fact that in the weekly, that's a bearish doji. I'm not doing it. Now, if we reverse up and we get some volume to push us through, I'm going to be the first one to be like, all right, this is fantastic. We fought off this bearish possible doji. The daily's starting to reverse it into a possible long leg doji. But the weekly candles, 6 days longer than the daily candle. The monthly candles, 24 days longer in most cases than the weekly candle. The 4-hourly candle, right, is 1/6 of the daily candle. So you start to break it into fundamental zones. And right now, as much as the daily looks good, the weekly, which is 7 times bigger, needs some help. I'm not saying it's horrible, but what I am saying is that needs some help. And we want to close up with a tug to the top side instead of a pull to the bottom side. And that's just how we're going to have to approach this as the day ends. And now we're starting to pull down just a little bit. I don't want to see this because this would, if we pull down, let's just say we come below 238, we're going to validate the fact that that's a bearish doji if we're closing at those levels. So there's not a lot of wiggle room here, a couple percent, not much. Does that make sense to anybody in the audience? I love that we have 166 people here on this Sunday morning. I love that we'll get about 50 minutes out of this live. I really do. Especially with the issues I had this morning. Edgar, thank you so much for that validation. Thank you so much for that. It says, yes, indeed. How are you, Julie? What do you mean? I don't know. You had it. Yes, tap the like button, please. I love it. It's Jason says scary that it does make sense. Yeah, that's the problem. It does make a lot of sense here, and we can find our avenue. That's the cool thing. By understanding the charts, we can find our avenue to how this needs to go bullish. But we also can see our areas where it has to avoid from going extremely bearish. So we've got a chance here, though. There's no doubt about it. It's just that weekly makes me a little nervous. I know you could make the optimism or the optics that it's better than it is, but I'm not. I don't like to. I don't like to give false bravado when it's not there. Binance traders are all in on Ripple XRP. Should you be worried? What the hell is that supposed to mean? Popular crypto. Oh, I don't even care. 72.28% of traders with open XRP positions on Binance futures are leaning bullish. So, whatever. I'd rather read this. Ripple's top lawyer says fight for fair regulation continues. So, but it did say 78% are going long right now. That's interesting. So, Stuart Alderodi, Ripple's top legal mind, recently told CNBC that the fight for clear and fair crypto regulation would continue after the company's resounding victory against the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. And we haven't heard anything from the SEC yet. Like, I have not seen the SEC say they're dropping the case against Ripple yet. Brad Garlinghouse has come out. Nobody's told me that anything else has come out that I haven't seen. So I'm interested to see when they finally say something. I have not seen the SEC officially say it. Like, maybe I'm under a rock. But to my knowledge, I haven't seen it. But I haven't seen everything this weekend. He added that Ripple would continue to spearhead it. Earlier this week, Ripple announced that the Securities and Exchange Commission would abandon its controversial appeal against the company. This came after the agency also dropped several high-profile cases against such heavyweights. That's why I hate how it keeps saying that the case was dropped on all these articles. It hasn't, though. That'd be like me saying I'm being sued by somebody and me coming out and saying, oh, the lawsuit's over. They've agreed to drop it, but that person has never come out and said it. So as far as the general public is concerned, they couldn't give a rat's ass if they don't know who Brad Garlinghouse is and so on and so forth. They're waiting for the Securities and Exchange Commission to say something. Furthermore, we've got that injunction from 2023 in July by Annalisa Perez, or earlier, it may have been even 24, I can't remember. But that injunction says that we can't, or that Ripple can't sell at a separate priced institution. So there's still a lot of legality there, even if the settlement's over. But we got to wait for it. I mean, we got to wait for them to actually say, we've dropped this lawsuit. Earlier this week, Ripple announced that the Securities and Exchange Commission would abandon its controversial appeal against the company. This came after the agency also dropped several high-profile cases against such heavyweights as Coinbase and Kraken amid its aggressive push to stop crypto enforcement. Notably, the enterprise blockchain company is yet to withdraw its cross appeal. It is unclear whether Ripple would proceed with it. During a recent Bloomberg interview, CEO Brad Garlinghouse indicated that the company was still considering the next steps. And honestly, that is where I wanted to show. I was trying to tie this in, but I'm running out of time. I had him on, I had it up here too. Where the heck's it at? Right here.
This has been a long battle. How much certainty does this provide? Is the entire case over?
So this provides a lot of certainty for Ripple, for frankly me personally, because the SEC had sued me. The SEC has abandoned their appeal. And so they filed suit in December of 2020. We won on the key parts of the case in the summer of 23. Judge Torres made a ruling that XRP in and of itself was not a security. That's almost a verbatim quote. The SEC filed an appeal about 8 months ago, and what they've now agreed is that they're going to drop that appeal. We still have a cross appeal pending, and so we go from being defendant really to plaintiff. So we now are in the driver's seat to determine how we want to proceed.
Are you dropping it?
We're going to see. It feels a lot better to be on the offense than the defense. You know, 4 years, we spent over $150 million defending that case. Not just for Ripple, but for the whole industry. I think it was really important that this SEC, the Gensler SEC, was really trying to bully and continue lawfare, filing lawsuits and lawsuits and lawsuits against crypto companies. That's over now, and I think that's great for the U.S. crypto industry, and frankly, great for crypto at large.
I mean, to that end, if you're looking at a new SEC, why not drop the case at this point? Why not clear why not clear the water?
Well, that certainly is an option. I mean, again, it's clear the SEC has said, you know, I think in retrospect, never would have brought this case. The judge did rule in certain instances back in 2015 and 2016, some XRP sales that we sold to accredited investors, to institutions, that those had constituted a security. And so there was a $125 million fine that's sitting in escrow. We wouldn't mind having that back. That's on the table. And I think there's some nuances to how this will play out. But it was important for us, for really the whole XRP community, for them to know that the case is over. For all intents and purposes, the case is over. The SEC is no longer pursuing this.
But to that end, to your point here, the court decision had ordered you to pay a $125 million civil penalty for exactly what you're talking about. Is that $125 million paid? Is what you're saying that's still up for dispute?
Yeah. Well, it's not in dispute. I mean, that's sitting in an escrow, and depending upon whether or not we decide to continue with our appeal, we could walk away and the whole thing be done. On the other hand, when you have a case where there were no investor harm, no investors lost any money, you're kind of like, wait, why are we here? And it really goes back to Gary Gensler fighting a fight that was about power grab. That was about overreach of the bureaucracy to try to take a new industry. What we're seeing now happen in Washington is smart legislation will come forward. You're seeing that happen with stable coins in real time. I think you'll have a market structure bill, is what it's described as, to provide clarity and rules for the SEC and CFTC.
We will look at the bigger picture. Right. We're going to have you for a little while this morning. But do you think that part of this means fighting it till the very end to make sure even that part of uncertainty around being sold to certain investors classifies as a security? Is that what you are fighting for ultimately at this point?
Well, I mean, at this point, all we're fighting for is, do we want to fight to get the $125 million back? Hey, look, I'll be honest. Would I have walked away from that before they appealed, before President Trump put Paul Atkins and Scott Bessent and David Sachs as critical, key, very smart leaders in this industry to bring this industry back on shore? I would have walked away. Now you look at that, you're like, this case in this SEC never would have been brought.
That's exactly what I said. The SEC is going to bite off more than they can chew. They should have just took the fine, because eventually, if they just keep pushing it with the wrong people, they're not going to even get that.
So where we find ourselves is, great, there's a clear legal victory to say XRP is not a security. That was good for the industry. But there's pieces of it that we think could be kind of cleaned up. And the question is, do we want to fight that fight, or can we come to an agreement with the SEC to drop everything?
The whole idea that this wouldn't have been brought under this SEC, have you had that specific discussion with Paul Atkins and with David Sachs?
Well, Paul Atkins hasn't yet been confirmed. He's a very knowledgeable guy about this industry and has been for a long time. But I've had conversations. I won't comment on specifics with certainly, I think David Sachs would agree that this is a case that didn't make a lot of sense in the beginning. Again, there was no investor harm. This was about Gary Gensler waging a war against this industry.
You know, it's interesting. I want to also point out that the affiliated token, of course, XRP has been up roughly 14%, now about 13% in the last 24 hours. You know, one thing a lot of people had looked at, we're thinking a lot about how the administration is handling crypto assets, particularly outside of Bitcoin. Why do you think XRP wasn't specifically named in the executive order for the digital asset stockpile?
Well, so XRP was named by the president on Truth Social. He posted something saying that there should be other tokens, that there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve and then a crypto stockpile that would include things like
But
XRP.
days later, the executive order didn't include it. Why was that?
I don't know what specifically was in the executive order. My understanding is there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve. There'll be a crypto stockpile representing other cryptos, and I would expect that will include XRP. Look, at the end of the day, I think the stark contrast is in the Biden administration, we couldn't get a meeting with people at the White House. Now we're welcomed into the White House, and that's just a massive change. I think we want this industry to thrive in the United States. We don't want to push it offshore where you have fewer regulations.
I think the reason I keep pushing you too is because I think now it's widely accepted that this is a pro-crypto administration. But the details, that is what's causing an overhang, the uncertainty of the details. So to the extent you have confidence, right, about XRP being in that stockpile or otherwise getting more support for an ETF, for example, where does that confidence come from and what kind of timeline do you see it happening on?
So I have immense confidence on the ETF. I think there's 11 different filings pending with the SEC to launch ETFs from everybody from Bitwise to Franklin Templeton and a whole bunch of people.
Do you guys want to watch the rest of this? Because I don't mind watching the rest of this with everybody. I think it's important. So I mean, if you guys are willing to watch the rest, I gotta go after this because I'm gonna go up to church in about 10 minutes. But we have time to watch the rest of this. Good morning, Kyle. Dogbite, welcome, and Edgar, good morning. I think this is extremely important, so I'm gonna keep playing this. Hopefully, you guys feel the same way.
I think those will be live in the second half of this year. We have seen, even outside the United States, you have live ETPs, and at a time when a lot of outflows are exiting some of the crypto ETFs, you're seeing inflows into XRP. And I think that's because you had this false negative pressure from the SEC, this kind of, you know, an exogenous hand holding things down that's now being released. And that's great for the market. That's great for...
Yeah, John, I shared for 30 minutes my thoughts of the market. If we can stay above $2.28 for XRP, it's one thing. Bitcoin's got to get over 86,400 approximately. Otherwise, we could... Oh, no, it's fine, John. And thank you for being in Tom's Army for over 1 year with the I Told You So badge. I greatly appreciate it. We've got to stay above a certain level, but we've also got to break past, you know, the 86,400 for XRP. That 228 is a big zone. You don't want to fall below that. Otherwise, you could technically be putting in these smaller head and shoulders patterns that corroborate the much bigger head and shoulders that we've got to invalidate. Otherwise, we're coming down in half.
Builders within the XRP ecosystem globally.
One more on the stockpile.
Yeah.
How much XRP would be in it? Where does it come from?
Well, my understanding of what I read about I think there are some questions, and that, you know, the devil may be in the details as Treasury implements some of this.
Absolutely in the details.
But my understanding is that the stockpile will be represented by seized other cryptos other than Bitcoin that then will be in that stockpile. So to the extent that various law enforcement agencies have seized cryptos, which would include XRP, that those would go into the stockpile in addition to the Bitcoin strategic reserve. That's my understanding.
We have been talking here about a big moment for you and for your company, of course, a rollback really of the tensions that had been brewing with the SEC. And let's talk about the next phase. One thing I'm really wondering about now that there's more clarity for you is that is an IPO, frankly, in your future now. We talk so much about the potential for the XRP token to be wrapped in an ETF. That is a method of listing. Right. So is listing possible now for you for Ripple?
Well, it's certainly something that is possible. The United States SEC under Gensler was so hostile to this industry. I mean, ironically, they approved the S1 from Coinbase and then sued them for doing the things they said they were doing. So this SEC, fortunately, is going to be, I think, very constructive and positive for this industry. So I think that's available. I think the company's at a stage where we can consider that. That being said, it isn't a huge priority. I think most companies are going public. Raising capital is something that is high on their radar. We have been in a very fortunate position to be able to grow the business organically. We're also, frankly, more proactive in looking at acquisitions. This is an industry that finally is going to be able to thrive in the United States, the largest economy in the world. And I think the industry is still underestimating the shift from the headwinds to the tailwinds. That's going to make a bigger difference than people think. And finally,
technically, no, XRP was not mentioned in the technically by the bill. But remember, there's two separate bills. There's going to be the Bitcoin reserve, and then there's going to be basically the Bitcoin Ethereum reserve, as I call it. Then you're going to have the alt reserve, and they may not have put it in the executive order, but there's a lot more gravata to it than just that.
U.S. market is really unlocked.
So it sounds like what you're saying, acquisitions are almost more of a priority now than an IPO for you. So then what would you be looking for to buy, and how big are you willing to go?
Well, I'm not going to name names, but look, Ripple at its core is a blockchain infrastructure company. We sell our technologies to business, primarily financial institutions, and we'll look at other things that are blockchain infrastructure companies. I think there will be consolidation this year. There's a lot of excitement about some of the changes, and we will lean into that.
The simple answer, if we don't break this, what looks like a bear flag, we'd come down to that 0.005. We've got to get above, ultimately, around 0.083 to invalidate that structure. Otherwise, yes, it's a very big drop for DGB.
For sure.
So when you think about what's possible in terms of financial institutions, there's been a lot of conversation about loosening of regulations and red tape when it comes to the financial industry and its interactions with the crypto community. What are you actually seeing happen? Are banks really warming up in a way that's significant right now?
I think unequivocally, yes. Just in the last few weeks, I have seen U.S. financial institutions go from being like, look, we're just not going to touch it because we don't want the extra scrutiny of the regulators, which again, may or may not have even been legal, given these are legal businesses. But you have large banks who used to say negative things, now saying positive things. I think the two areas you'll see the most activity in the short term, one is around custody. These are banks that want to be able to custody, particularly when you see real-world assets being tokenized. You need to be able to safely manage and custody that for customers and potentially for the bank. And the second is around payments. The global payments infrastructure still remains very dated. Wires are slow. I just had a wire that was sending over euros disappear for 5 days. That's surprising in a world of the internet.
So one part of that payments infrastructure that I'm watching really closely is, of course, stablecoins.
Sure.
There is starting to be more clarity in Washington, and you're seeing people starting to use stablecoins in really interesting ways. I think about Robinhood, for example, using stablecoin in terms of facilitating 24-hour trading. What's next? If you think about the next forefront of stablecoins now that the U.S. is getting toward clarity, what's possible?
Well, I think we're underestimating how big that might get. Today that market's about $230 billion. So I think some smart people think that may go up 10x in the next 5 years. I think that's probably right. The two leading players in Tether as well as USDC are both, I think, poised to do well in that market. Ripple launched our own stablecoin at the end of last year. It's already ahead of our own internal forecasts in terms of where we are at this point in the year. Still, we're small, but the goal is by the end of the year for RLUSD, Ripple stablecoin, to be one of the top 5 in the market by the end of the year. And I think the whole market
very
is going to grow
concerning,
dramatically
John.
this year.
So what does it take you to get there? Who are you pairing up with? Are you creating some financial partnerships in order to make RLUSD more of a household name?
Yeah, for sure. Even today we had more listings go live for RLUSD on some global crypto exchanges. Anytime you do something new, it takes a minute for that kind of, the pun of the ripple effect of seeing how that plays out. And so we're seeing that happen in real time. So I'm really pleased. And again, as I said, we're ahead of our Q1 forecasts of where we expect it to be. So we feel really good about that progress.
Given through what you have gone through with the SEC, I think one major question is how tokens list in the future. What do they mean? How are they classified? Now that you're talking about many other, say even private equity companies looking to tokenize their funds, venture capitalists, Kathy Wood told us yesterday she's considering that for her own fund. what does this mean? What are the rules of the road? Are people going to list and put the cart in front of the horse as they do so?
Yeah. Well, look, I think tokenizing, like what Kathy Wood's talking about, democratizing access to different investment vehicles and different investment types is very compelling. Even, imagine Shark Tank enabling the participation by different sharks. Like, there's some really interesting stuff you could do. Right now, Congress, it seems, is more focused on getting stablecoin legislation passed. That went for markup last week, and I think you'll see that potentially in front of the president in weeks. The other piece of legislation I think will move quickly after that is kind of the market structure bill. Last summer, something called FIT 21 passed the House, did not get through the Senate. I think that a market structure bill like FIT 21 will come before Congress, and hopefully before the summer recess, we'll see that pass also.
But you think about how many exchanges are now looking to loosen their listing standards already on the heels of lighter oversight and the cart before the horse question. Do you think that people are getting a little ahead of themselves and listing things that shouldn't be listed?
Well, I don't think about it as lighter regulation because, frankly, I think the industry wants to be regulated. And what we've been saying for years as an industry is we just want clear regulation. We don't want lawsuits just claiming one thing and the next week contradicting themselves, which is exactly what Gensler's SEC was doing. So I think just the fact that we have an SEC who's trying to work constructively, instead of trying to sue more companies, let's actually work and let's codify and get legislation to provide that clarity.
But again, if you don't have that clarity, what you saw years ago was an ICO boom where tons of things that were raising money never worked out for the people that were buying the tokens or the coins.
Look, I agree, and I said then that I think of some of these ICOs were a lot more like IPOs. They were securities. The problem is the SEC then kind of used that to just blanket and say, Gensler said before he was SEC chair, he didn't think they were securities. And then after he became SEC chair, it's kind of his power grab. Gensler wanted everything under his jurisdiction. So I think obviously that ICO boom went away, and there's lots of ways this government can regulate and manage fraud and manage criminal activity. And that did happen. People did go to jail.
I have one more question for you about Ripple and XRP in particular on the supply and how it's managed and the unlocks. Is there anything you would do to change the amount of supply brought to market? Can you do that? How does that exactly work? Because there is a level of dilution for XRP when more supply is brought in on a regular basis.
So this is one of the things I'm glad you asked about, because there's frankly misinformation, sometimes disinformation, people spreading falsehoods out there. The amount of XRP that was created in 2012 when it was first started, that blockchain was first started, was 100 billion units. That can't be increased. It's slightly deflationary, and now there's about 99.9 billion units. Ripple owns about 42% of that supply. We have had, and for, 8 years, we published something called the XRP Markets Report, where we share how much we are introducing into the market, because we want that to be predictable. And that has been the case for many years now. And so we will continue to make sure that's very predictable. At some point, maybe we won't be selling as much. We'll see how that plays out in the future. But right now, frankly, we get criticized for owning too much, and then we're criticized for selling some. But we want to do that in a constructive way, which is what we've done for years.
Oh, there you go. I wanted to share that. All right, I gotta go. I'm gonna go to church here this morning. Everybody have a blessed day. But we do need more clarity to move forward. Yes, I'm still worried. And if you guys go back to the beginning of this live, I'm worried about this weekly candle. We need it to have some volatility to the upside. That's all I'm gonna say, because it does look like a weekly bearish doji. It looks like a gravestone in design here. But the daily is a reversal as of right now. But we're going to need some confirmation for tomorrow's candle, especially with this weekly. So let's just see how this plays out. And let's